What are the biggest roadblocks in your career weren't external at all, but hidden inside how you think and how others respond to it? Kerry Milne grew up believing she wasn't smart. A dyslexia diagnosis helped, but years later, as a leader, she still faced feedback that she was too loud, too intense, too much. Coaching helped her fit in, but it also masked who she really was. Then at 46, an ADHD diagnosis changed everything. It was confronting, but also clarifying. A moment of reframing, not just reflection. In this episode, we bust through the roadblocks of misconception, masking, and misunderstood neurodiversity, and explore how knowing yourself can be the most powerful leadership tool of all. This one's not polished, it's real, raw, and full of insight. Enjoy. Welcome to Busting Roadblocks, the podcast where we break down the biggest roadblocks in business and help you clear a path to success. I'm Janet Charteris, your host and the founder of JC Consultancy, where we help businesses remove barriers and unlock their full potential. Today, we're going to hear from Kerry Milne, marketing expert, mentor, speaker, board member, and coach. If you've heard any of my material before, being a marketer can have some negative connotations for some people. So I'm going to reframe it, and that is that you are a business strategy expert, because I got to dig into your CV on LinkedIn, and your work experience spans banking, finance, retail, telco, lottery, flying doctors, and more. So your role as a consultant now comes with a boatload of experience. Welcome, Kerry.
Thank you. And I resemble that comment actually about being a marketer. No, I am one of those marketers that has probably spent more time in sales and BD than with creative agencies. So yeah, it is an interesting word, isn't it? Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Welcome. It's really good to have you here because I'm really excited about this specific people leadership situation we're going to cover today. And I know it's a bit more of a personal story. This should resonate with quite a few people, particularly with what's happening in the media around this spectrum work. As soon as people have started to uncover it, you're finding that tons of people in your life have been sitting on this spectrum, just at different levels of it. And the uncovering is the significant bit. But I think this is going to be really informative for the audience. Can you set the scene for us? Where are we and who are we dealing with?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'll just quickly start right back in school where I didn't do very well. I was had the lowest score to get into university for anybody in my year across the state.
Mm-hmm.
I was just diagnosed with dyslexia at 13. So I found school really hard. Fast forward to say, 1999. I was leading marketing teams in, fairly significant businesses like RAC, Vodafone, and I became quite senior, fairly young, which came with all sorts of interesting challenges, particularly in insurance and motoring businesses where, not only was I young, but I was a female sitting around a table with fairly experienced men who knew their stuff for the most part. And my little voice, I think, became more aggressive as a perception rather than being like a contributor who's trying to solve a problem. So that I guess is the theme that continues through this little story that we have. What I sort of found at 28, I think I was leading a team of 30. I had the biggest media budget in Western Australia, probably one of the biggest in our category in insurance. And I was sort of thinking, well, this is essentially what some people actually strive for to get to as the pinnacle of their career. And I'm 28 and I'm so underwhelmed.
28, that's not good.
Yeah. So off I went on a bit of a journey across different sized businesses, which at the time I didn't realize, but on reflection, I was absolutely collecting this IP bank of the things that are barriers to growth for massive behemoths are actually the same things that are barriers for growth to startups, just on a different scale. I ended up kind of getting to executive level roles, which meant that the teams that I was managing were more senior. I had a bit of a reputation for coming in and fixing underperforming teams, which usually meant that they just had been lacking in direction or leadership or context. And actually, they weren't underperforming as individuals or as a team. They just hadn't had anybody, take care of them sometimes in both like a financial and contractual way, and
Yeah.
sometimes just in a respect and give them what they need
Yeah.
to do their job.
Yeah.
When I got to kind of sitting around a table at an executive level, that voice that was the one that had to be a little bit aggressive to get heard when I was 28 had been dialed up over the
See?
years, because that's how I had kind of, on reflection, that's the mask I'd had to wear to get heard. And what was weird to me was that I wasn't trying, like in my brain, I wasn't trying to be aggressive. I wasn't trying to at all be offensive or rude. I was focused on the problem. I was focused on solving the problem, and I could see like my contribution, I was sure was going to help move whatever the problem was forward. It started to become apparent that that wasn't that way of negotiating or communicating
Yeah.
was not going to work anymore.
It had worked to date. So the aggressive voice had got you. I mean, it must have, right? Because you've now getting into these C-suite level positions.
Yeah,
That combined with your strategy has worked for you.
I think I'm probably over dramatizing by saying aggressive, but I think I'm doing that for a reason, right? It's like I wasn't the person that waited till everyone else had finished and then said what I thought. I was kind of, and again, I was one of a few females. I was always one of a few females.
Yeah.
And that didn't actually bother me. And I think it had worked to date because I had found a way that to manage up and to lead a team that was a balance of that. And when I got into like sort of executive level roles, the responsibilities that I had and the expectations and just the optics,
Mm-hmm.
you're more visible. You can't you can't be yourself at a, drinks on a Friday, like all of that stuff that it just was completely weird to me, because I was like, oh, but I was just being me, or I was just saying what I thought.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that you couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And I suppose the other thing was that when I got to leading senior leaders, my expectations of them grew. And so when I was inheriting teams and perhaps inheriting people that didn't meet those expectations, the conversations were, well, I haven't been asked to do this before, or
Love that one.
yeah, I can remember a very specific example where I got called to HR and they said, oh, such and such has put in a complaint because you asked them to do blah. And I said, okay, that's their job.
Yeah.
What do I do about that? And they're like, oh, nothing, but because it's a complaint, we have to go through the process. And I was mind blown. And that was probably my little window into how
Something.
it really works. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess you're in this position where you have risen really quickly through the ranks, and now you're up against a whole lot of people, not up against, but you're working with a lot of people who you have high expectations of, because you know how you were in their positions and you know how you reacted and you know what's expected of you and how you would deliver it. So amongst the other roadblocks, we're looking at an environment where you're well into your career and you're also on a bit of a self-discovery journey. So this loud, aggressive, not aggressive, this loud voice where you've been
Vocal. Yeah.
vocal and assertive has got you here. And you've got to this apex, which is always the fun bit, because I think I'd love to talk to my 20 and 30-year-old self and go, hey,
Oh, gosh.
when you get there, you don't actually have all of the power and all the decision making and all the stuff you thought those senior leaders have. They still have someone they have to report to.
Yes.
But you do hopefully find this time to self-reflect. And I think that's really important when you get there, is to go, actually, is this me? Is this what I want to be doing? Am I wanting to stay on this freight train, for want of a better word? Am I heading in the right direction? And you're noticing that some of your behaviors and the reactions to your way of thinking, which I totally get, because I'm listening to this going, I might have to do something after we have this discussion, because
well, do you know, like the crescendo of this story is twofold. One, I got an opportunity to move out of big business and into not-for-profit to go and work for the Flying Doctor, which was probably as good as working in big jobs in corporate because of the brand. We got a new CEO, and that CEO essentially over the course of 6 to 12 months just got rid of the entire executive and brought in, as CEOs do, right? That's a completely normal thing to do.
Yeah.
But I was broken.
Yeah.
I was, how could you possibly make me like it, I am one
I'm
of
amazing.
I am amazing, right?
Have you not seen
Of
my
course,
history?
of course, this was all happening in my head. None of this was coming out of my mouth. And at the same time, I was thinking, oh my God, maybe I'm not that amazing. I knew that this one wasn't actually about me.
And that honestly is often the case, is that new CEOs come in, they strip senior leadership, they replace it with people they like. More often than not, yes men. And you're like, well, that was stupid, because you do need different thought in this room.
Well, that's a very common move, to replace them with people that you know. And unfortunately, if you're not the greatest, strongest leader, you will surround yourself with people who will just agree with you. And that is just a quick roadmap to decline.
Yeah.
So I think the kind of getting made redundant was, even though, by the way, I really was unhappy in that job, but that wasn't the point. It was like, it was a complete hit to my ego. And all of the stories that I'd sort of told myself over the years, and, you know, struggling at school, struggled to get through uni, always felt like I, you know, was sitting around a table that I didn't belong at, always felt like I was fighting to say something, to have not say something, which is what happened. That's actually what happened over the years, is that I just ended up keeping it to myself and, you know, going and having chats with whoever needed my help or whatever out of those meetings, because I did just like go, okay, well, I'm not sure if I'm doing something wrong here.
Yeah.
And so fast forward to 3 or 4 years ago, and some family members were going through the process of getting assessed for ADHD. And my sister happened to mention to me, I think you should probably go and get tested. And I was like, it was Christmas lunch, and yeah, and there were already a few champagnes down. So I think I went another few after that, because I was like, oh, cool. What does that mean? I had no idea what it was. The only frame of reference I had was when I was a kid, my cousins, boys, were naughty, and they had this thing called ADHD, and it meant that they couldn't sit still and they were boisterous.
Yeah.
So it turns out I do have it. And in fact, the psychiatrist, when I went to have my assessment, she said, oh, your GP has referred you for, you know, to look at your anxiety medication, because I've had like anxiety since I was a kid.
Yeah.
So she said to review your anxiety medication. She's also mentioned here that we should potentially do an assessment for ADHD. And I said, don't worry about that. That's just something we were talking about. That's not really why I'm here. 10 minutes into this appointment, she said, okay, so I'm just going to let you know, for the rest of the appointment, I'm going to focus on the ADHD assessment. I've seen everything that I need to see to know that you are definitely probably in that category. And anxiety is a massive sort of comorbidity, they call it, because your brain is doing that whole you don't belong thing all day, every day, with 1,000 different things. So it's no wonder that we're suffering with pangs of anxiety. In fact, paralyzing anxiety at some stages. Yeah. And so my world changed.
Yeah.
My world
absolutely changed. So the ADHD diagnosis, that could be quite hard to hear, but it could also be a bit of a relief and revolutionary. Like, I can imagine
Yeah.
you go back and you review all your past actions in these meetings that you had where you were like interrupting people and you're like, actually, no, that's just normal for me because that's part of the ADHD diagnosis. And did you
Yeah.
feel like you've kind of found your superpower, like you're thinking differently? Because well, the way you're describing how you got to that C-suite is it's not a result of someone who's got a really good education and they understood all the principles and they
Mm.
implemented it correctly and they sat there patiently and did what they were told and eventually got to C-suite. You just went, wonk, I'm going to do it
Yeah.
my way, and I don't think that's the way you solve this issue. I'm going to show you how I'm going to do it. And
Yeah.
I want to be clear because and I know you get this because there are a lot of haters out there when
Yeah.
you say things like she's a superpower.
Yes.
And I'm not saying it's a superpower. I'm saying understanding yourself and
Yeah.
understanding what the implications and the challenges are, and therefore managing them is your superpower, right? So just everyone who's going to go, it's not a superpower, no one said it was, but, and yeah,
I think so. In my opinion, awareness is the superpower.
yeah,
And for all of the reasons that you just listed off there, in terms of knowing how I communicate and how my brain works and how that comes out
yeah.
versus how somebody that doesn't have a brain like mine. I was working for some of those big, big brands. It was such an amazing thing for me because I got to do so much coaching. What
Wow.
the result of that was is that I had coached myself into, or had been coached into a version of myself that was the one that towed the line,
Yeah.
essentially.
And worked in that
Um,
environment.
that's right. That worked in that environment. And I think what would have been and what is an amazing thought for me is if those coaching conversations were more about, hey, did you know your brain might work differently?
Yeah.
Whether I would have stayed in corporate for so long or,
Right.
you know,
And as
what,
opposed to let's change you for the environment, why don't we lean into the stuff that makes you special and unique? And
yeah,
maybe that manager's job is also to make sure that the people are in the right position. And it's not just that you've got a finance degree and you're a CFO. It's more going,
no,
is this business right for you? Because it's a
yeah,
good job and it pays well, but there are other good jobs and they pay well too. And
yeah,
maybe you're better suited for them. So stop
yeah,
chasing this, what you think you should have, start chasing stuff that leans into your strengths. So
that's
you've got
it.
this diagnosis. You're now getting some kind of, I'm hoping, help to manage it.
Yes. Well, I think you kind of said it was revolutionary, but I imagine it was hard to hear. It took me 6 months to talk about it
Right.
because I didn't know what it was to start with. And then when my psychiatrist gave me, I left her office thinking, well, that was a waste of time.
Yeah.
And she
This woman
said,
knows nothing.
she
Yep.
said, before you come in next time, just have a read of these brochures.
Mhm.
And I was like, yeah, cool. Thanks. See you in 4 weeks. And so I put those brochures in my handbag. And the night before this next appointment, 4 weeks later, because ADHD, I thought, oh, I'm pretty sure she gave me something to read. I better read. Anyway, it was something to read. And it was also like a survey on yourself as a kid,
Mhm.
and then a survey on yourself now,
Mhm.
and then a score of, whether like how neurodivergent you are essentially.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was off the charts. And these things that were in this survey, I was completely overwhelmed by how much they related to me and how much I didn't realize some of them were only things that
You did?
part of the population.
Yeah.
I thought everyone had a thousand,
Yeah.
like a thousand threads of thoughts going on in their head at once. Apparently they don't.
No.
Yeah, apparently they don't. I thought that everybody could see the, like, conceptualize and see the kind of how the parts fit together.
Yeah.
No, 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 they can't. Not
No.
everyone can.
No.
And so there were all these things like, how do you go with time? And I'm when I was talking to her, I was like, oh, I'm perfect with time. Like I'll never miss a deadline. I'll never blah, blah. ADHD people brilliant with deadlines,
Yeah.
but tell them to do something in their own time. Nah, they
Yeah.
need urgency because that's
Yeah.
the dopamine hit, right?
Yeah.
So back to your sort of question around what did it mean for me, the revelation definitely sits in the awareness and the understanding. It was like I finally understood that everyone else that I'd been comparing myself to and not feeling like I was the same as,
Yeah.
that I was out of place, I shouldn't have been there, and I was going to get found out, and I was such a fake. It was like I'd finally been given this book, like a manual that said, here, this is your manual, theirs is different
Yeah.
to life. And so the revelation in knowing that I wasn't dumb and I was around those tables because I was good at my job and my voice is worthy. It has completely changed my way of speaking about myself. I think I've said this to you before, but I was 46 before I said out loud, I'm really good at X.
Yeah.
And
Great.
I'm really good at growing businesses.
Yeah.
46, I don't want that for any young person. I just yeah, so I guess I talk about the ADHD thing a lot and it brings out, as you sort of said at the beginning, it brings out similar stories for people.
Yeah.
The reason that it feels so, oh my God, ADHD is everywhere, it's because our age groups, kids are being
Right.
diagnosed.
Yeah.
We didn't know
We
about,
didn't do
like
that.
my mum was actually quite forward in the fact that she got a girl diagnosed with dyslexia at 13 because
Yeah.
that is actually a comorbidity of ADHD. So my psych says your dyslexia was actually just a misdiagnosis
Yeah.
of D because it was 1989
Yeah.
and you didn't, like, girls didn't get it.
No, 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 at all. And I was about to say, like, even when you were saying your cousins had it, I was like, wow, I
Yeah.
don't remember hearing about it until probably the 2000s. And I can tell you, I went to school with lots of kids who had ADHD. Some of them are amazingly successful and they did
Oh,
really well at school because they also had OCD on top of it and something
yeah.
else.
Oh,
So they like narrowed down,
tick.
found their
Yeah.
specialty and went for it.
Oh, absolutely.
So yeah, it's actually the fact that you even had a family that understood there was not, they probably didn't understand it was a spectrum. Back then we had autistic spectrum wasn't a thing.
The term neurodivergence can pick up all of those things. So yeah, ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, dyslexia, dyscalculia, which is basically the same but with numbers, which I have
Yeah.
still. Yeah, so that diagnosis is now much broader because there's a much broader understanding, and things like OCD and all kinds of other things sit under there.
And so, I mean, like I would say, so when I'm thinking about this, not all of our audience is going to go out and get, because you can do a lot of self-diagnosis online that gives you an idea whether you should go talk to someone.
Yeah.
And I do actually recommend you do it because it's quite fun to do. I've done it. My sister and I have done it.
Oh, where did you come out? So
I'm borderline and she's quite far into ADHD, which is, she's like, well, not surprising. And I'm like, man, imagine if we'd had that when we were kids, we would have excelled.
honestly, so, highlights package. A couple of years later, I also got diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, which, made complete sense to me when I found out what it was.
Yeah.
But in my dad's later years, I started to think about, my God, because I think my dad struggled a lot with depression and anxiety as an adult.
Yeah.
He would do things like need to go and remove himself from a situation, and I'd be like, that's so weird.
Yeah.
He would have been off the charts autistic, and so that is the generation that I feel most sad for, I think. Yeah, he'd going through life thinking. And also we came from a very Catholic family, so overlay that and you just don't talk about your feelings.
Yes.
So yeah, I feel really grateful for the awareness.
Yeah, and I think I think awareness and understanding, regardless of whether you end up on the spectrum or not, is crucial to anyone's leadership development, because I know personally myself that I had a real weakness of when anyone became a roadblock for me, I decided that they were stupid. And I'd have to really go, they're not stupid, they just don't understand what you're saying yet. So you need to change how you're communicating it with them, because once they get it, they'll be off with you as well. But I was like, why aren't you running with me? We're off. Like, I've decided this, I've thought it through my mind, you guys should be with me. So even regardless of whether it's spectrum or not, understanding where your weaknesses are. And you don't have to solve them, but you just need to understand them.
Yeah.
So this has led you to your real life now.
Yeah. Starts at 47, apparently.
What are we doing now? Now that we don't have to be in corporate and we don't have to toe the line, what are we doing now?
So after I got over myself of being made redundant, someone said, "Oh, look, why don't you just do some consulting? Like, we're always needing executive level sort of strategy and marketing, but no one wants to pay for it ongoing." And my immediate thought was, who's going to pay me for, like, no one's going to pay me for mine. Oh my gosh. And so, yeah, 7 years later, it turns out people do pay me for my opinion. And the way that I think I now understood how I was so good, became so senior, is because I can solve problems. So I can see the dots that need to be connected that other people can't see. It no doubt fits within pattern recognition, which is huge in some, definitely huge in autism spectrum. I can ask sort of 3 or 4 questions and think, yep, I've seen this one before. What I would suggest is ABC, and then come back and talk to me when you've had a little bit of a dig around.
Yeah.
I think you talk about the sort of common barriers, and they're the same things that I talk about, because everything comes back to those 5 or 6 things.
You've now gone and changed your life as a result of this diagnosis and become a consultant. What would your advice be to the senior leaders out there who are dealing, because this is a growing, I guess, movement, and then I mean it in a positive way, because
yeah,
it's good that we all become more self-aware. And I'm almost thinking, and I'm hoping you'll probably agree with this, that, instead of just throwing these Myers-Briggs assessments at us, why are we not doing neurodivergent, not just top line free assessments to go, okay, we kind of know what we're dealing with a little bit better. So what would your advice be to, because obviously it didn't hurt your career, but you also, your own self, it kind of...
No, it hurt me mentally. And, I didn't actually feel, I sort of have felt like a fraud for a lot of my life. So, yeah, I think the leadership investment in people can't be a one size fits all. And I'm not a training expert or anything. Certainly don't profess to be, but and you're right, it didn't hurt me in terms of on paper. But yeah, I was an incredibly anxious person because I just didn't feel like I belonged there. And so I think leaders, it comes back to that sort of awareness thing.
Yeah.
The other thing this goes back to your point around who you employ as a leader around you. Having diverse teams isn't just about where people were born, their cultural background or their religion or their gender or whatever it might be. It's how their brain works. And you absolutely have to have diverse points of view and ways of working and ways of problem solving in a team these days, because it is a competitive edge. Having someone in your team, if you have anything to do with analysis or optimization or operational excellence, anything like that, get some diversity in there around some some ADHDers or some ASDers, because we can pick that stuff from from sitting at the table eating our lunch. It's an accelerator to growth. Give us something like building a spreadsheet for no real particular reason and you've lost us. So knowing how like different people work in teams, and the sort of power of that, it is a big one.
Again, it's not just self-understanding, it's understanding your team, but beyond the surface. I genuinely do think there is diversity in thinking. It's really hard to explain to people that if you get a bunch of engineers around a table, in general, they've got linear way of viewing things. And
absolutely.
Almost scientific ways. And if you chuck in with the consumer at the centre and someone who thinks that people at the centre, and you approach that same problem, you will get a better result. Because if nothing else, they'll sit there and go, I don't understand this. You need to explain this until I understand it. Because if you can't explain it so I can understand it, how are we going to get the team to do it?
going to, like, how are your customers going to get it?
Yeah.
You know, the sort of rhetoric around, oh, everyone's got ADHD these days. It's like,
Yeah.
well, actually, 1 in 5 people do.
Yeah,
So that means your customers do.
yes. And how can you get their attention and get them engaged because they don't care. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kerry, I think that was an excellent real life example of how knowing yourself can transform your journey. And of course, when leadership can be mindful of neurodiversity, and it's just awareness and understanding, right? You can create environments where teams will thrive and you will get better results for the business. So as with all our guests, the story isn't perfect. And I think the real colour you've added. Can you tell our audience how to get hold of you right now? And obviously I will put it into the podcast notes.
Oh, thank you.
Listening and trying to find out.
Yeah, LinkedIn, Kerry Milne. I live on there. So
cool.
You definitely find me there.
So yeah, we'll add that to I'll add literally your link to the podcast descriptor.
Amazing.
Thank you so much and for sharing your experience with our audience. Now, if you found this podcast valuable, make sure you subscribe and share it with your network. And if you have a business challenge you'd like me to cover, reach out on LinkedIn or at jcconsultancy.co. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What roadblocks are you facing right now?